Shall we go? Thank you. Good afternoon, dear panelists, guests, participants, friends, and
This meeting is being recorded.
and colleagues. On behalf of the Center for Policy Dialogue and Frederick Ebert Stiftung, FES Bangladesh, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you who have joined us this afternoon at this dialogue on trade in services in the digital age. So as we know that trade in services is an important component of global trade. And as economies are progressing, they are also increasingly relying on services trade. So the World Trade Organization indicates that the trade in services has been expanding rapidly at a faster pace than trade in goods since 2011. And services currently account for about 3/4 of GDP in the developed economies. And even in many developing economies are also they are also seeing increasingly service-based trade, and in some cases this is occurring even faster than many advanced countries. At the same time, we are seeing that digitalization has made the trade in services much easier. This is expanding the cross-border tradability of services, is opening new opportunities for economies and individuals also. And technology has been playing an instrumental role in expanding the trade in services. However, we know that there are many challenges which are hindering to reap the full potential of trade in services. And trade in digital services has become an important feature for Bangladesh, also for Bangladesh's economic growth. Traditionally, we know that Bangladesh's export has been heavily concentrated on a few products, particularly the textile and garments products. However, there is also on an immense potential and opportunity for Bangladesh to benefit from international trade in services. And we are seeing that during this pandemic, the adoption of technology has expedited, and the by using technology, the services trade has also expanded during this pandemic. So with these aspects in mind, the Center for Policy Dialogue and FES has partnered to undertake the study. This study is part of this part of a program which is titled Future of Work, which is being undertaken at CPD in collaboration with FES. So the presentation which is going to be made today that explores how Bangladesh can benefit from digital trade in services. Excuse me. And what it will take for Bangladesh to adapt to the new regime in the digital trade. So by looking at the preparedness in terms of access to technology and also policy framework, so we tried to look at a number of issues and make a number of recommendations for enabling the country to benefit from digital trade in services. And the prospect of digital trade in services in Bangladesh is of course constrained by many factors, like many other developing and least developed countries. Some of these include lack of adequate internet connectivity and ICT infrastructure, weaknesses in trade facilitation and trade logistics, inadequate skilled workforce, gender divide in digital literacy and knowledge, financial regulations and payment related complexities, and lack of access to sufficient funds. So the paper argues that in order to reap the full potential of digital trade in services, these hindrances will have to be removed. And additionally, the policymakers also should play a proactive role in the global policymaking process, particularly in the context of the multilateral trading system, where this issue is being discussed at this point in time. So this paper will be presented by my co-author, Mr. Kamruzaman, who was a senior research associate of CPD earlier, And today we have a number of experts as panelists who will share their insights not only on the paper, but also on the subject as a whole, because digital trade in services is an emerging issue and it is equally important for all the countries and also for South Asian countries. And we want to also hear from our panelists who are associated with World Trade Organization and international organizations like UNCTAD. And we have, as I have mentioned, we have a number of experts from our South Asian region and also from Bangladesh. So therefore, today's presentation will be made in the context of Bangladesh, but we will hear from our distinguished panelists their perspective with respect to their organizations and countries. So they will also discuss the overall prospect and challenges related to the expansion of the sector and how these can be overcome. So I would introduce our panelists to you. We have Dr. Ratnakar Udhikari, who is the Executive Director at Enhanced Integrated Framework of the World Trade Organization. We have Mr. Mohammad Mesbaul Haq, General Manager, Payment Systems Department, Bangladesh Bank, which is the Central Bank of Bangladesh. Dr. Rashmi Banga, Senior Economic Affairs Officer, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. We have Dr. Selim Rahan, who is a professor at Department of Economics, University of Dhaka, and the Executive Director of SANEM, South Asia Network on Economic Modeling. We have Mr. Mohammad Mahbubur Rahman, Chief Executive Officer at the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation Limited, HSBC Bank, in Bangladesh. Then we have Mr. Syed Almas Kabir, President, Bangladesh Association of Software and Information Services, BASIS. We also have Dr. Pushma Sharma, Executive Director, South Asia Watch on Trade, Economics and Environment, SAUTI. We have Dr. Dushni Wirakun, Executive Director, Institute of Policy Studies of Sri Lanka. And we have Dr. Priyadarshi Das, Associate Professor, who is a professor and Managing Editor at G20 Digest, co-editor, Journal of Asian Economic Integration Research and Economics Research. And he is Associate Professor at the Research and Information System for Developing Countries, RIS, based in New Delhi, India. So before we start the proceedings of the dialogue, we also have a number of other experts at the audience. We have Professor Mustafizur Rahman, our own trade expert at the Center for Policy Dialogue, and then we have Sadhun Kumar Das, who is with FES. We have Dr. Khundukar Ghulam Muazzam, who is the Research Director at the Center for Policy Dialogue. We have a number of friends from the media. So we would like to thank all of them. So before I start the proceedings of the dialogue, I would like to invite Mr. Felix Kolbitz, resident representative of FES Bangladesh office, to make his welcome remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Hamida. And thank you very much, everyone, already for joining today. I know it's just a few days before Eid, so I think most of you already have some other things on your mind with the upcoming holidays. So thank you very much for taking this time for joining us for today's event, as it's one of the, actually part of a series of events or webinars we have recently together with the Center for Policy Dialogue on the future of work and also the upcoming changes in the economy. So I think this today will also be another exciting opportunity to talk about these issues, as we already had a very fascinating discussion recently, for example, on the platform economy and digitalization. So for all those who have not heard of Friedrich Ebert Stiftung yet, we are a political foundation based in Germany with offices worldwide. We were founded with the inheritance of Germany's first democratically elected president in 1925. And one of the main goals we have is social justice, access to education, as well as quite a lot around social democracy and the economy. And here we have actually set in Bangladesh set the future work as one of our key themes. And the Center for Policy Dialogue has been our one of our longest and most trustworthy partners here. Also one of the partners that has an extensive internal resources and expertise in this area, which we are very delighted to rely on for this and also other projects, I have to admit. So with the hand of digitalization, the fourth industrial revolution is approaching to Bangladesh. It may take some time to spread widely in the society and the economy, but it will come. So one of the aims of this project line is to show options how to deal with these upcoming changes. There are opposing opinions. Some studies indicate that employment will be reduced at a fast pace due to introduction of technology. On the other hand, a number of studies argue that while automation will destroy some employment, there could also be opportunities for new jobs due to technological change. As a matter of fact, how the future of work will be shaped due to the fourth industrial revolution will depend on the preparedness of countries in terms of educating and skilling its human resources and providing access to technologies. In this background, FES and CPD have taken 4 studies on the current technological development and innovations in the area of artificial intelligence, platformization, transformation of healthcare, and international trade in services. The key objectives of these studies are to take stock of the current status in case of the preparedness of this country, both infrastructure-wise and policy-wise, to understand what factors are driving the technological change and how the fourth industrial revolution can impact the specific sectors, and to make policy recommendations for each of those areas. About today's event and about today's study, trade in services is an important component of global trade. As economies are progressing, they're increasingly relying on the service sector. Many developing economies are also becoming increasingly service-based, and in some cases, this is occurring even more rapidly than in developed economies. In Bangladesh, for example, the service sector constitutes about 51% of the total gross domestic product at the moment. Due to digitalization, trade in services is becoming much, much easier. The growing cross-border tradability of services is opening new opportunities for national economies and individuals. Though technology plays an instrumental role in expanding services and trade, there are several challenges which hinder to reap the full potential of trade in services. Thus, the objectives of this study were to find out the state of preparedness in Bangladesh for taking opportunity in digital services trade, to analyze the challenges of the sector, and to give policy suggestions to prepare better for benefiting from digitalization of trade in services. Today is the second event on the digital trade in services, and we are inviting you all to be engaged as much as you can so that all important issues, challenges, and potentials of it can come out to the public sphere, which are vital for policy change as we believe in. I would like to use that as opportunity to thank Dr. Famida Khatun and Muhammad Kanu Zaman for writing this in-depth analytical paper and for willing to be engaged in this launching and discussion event. Many thanks also, as I already said in the beginning, to CPD for being our partner in this project and for hosting and organizing this event today. Today, we are really amazed to see 9 panelists with us, joining from different parts of the globe. They have expertise and long experience on the issue, and we are looking forward to having interactive discussions with the audience. Our deep gratitude to them for giving consent to this event already in advance, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion later on. And with this, thank you very much to everyone. I would like to hand over back to Famida.
Thank you very much, Felix, for your welcome remarks. And also thank you once again for collaborating with us. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Mohammad Kamruzaman, who is the former Senior Research Associate at the Center for Policy Dialogue. So he has worked with me on this paper, and you have 20 minutes to present because we have a long set of distinguished panelists and we would like to hear from them. At this point in time, I would also like to recognize that Dr. Rajan Ratna from UNESCAP, he has joined us, and then I can see also some other Professor Kamaluddin. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining once again. So, Kamruzaman, over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to present here in front of this august audience and all these experts. So I'll start my presentation right away. Has it gone full screen? Can someone? Okay. As Famida ma'am has already given a good, very brief background of this paper. So this paper was, this study was kind of started in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. So where digitalization was going all around the world and even in Bangladesh. So in this regard, given the future is coming up and the fourth industrial revolution is here, already almost here. So in that regard, digitalization is taking the shape, shaping up the way work is being done. In this regard, this paper has been developed. And today's presentation, the presentation has been divided in 7 chapters. We will give a brief background, talk about some objectives, how the methodology was developed. There are certain conceptual issues regarding digital trade, and we'll also give some brief background on the global and national trends of digital trade in services, along with some digital preparedness of Bangladesh, and propose some recommendations for Bangladesh. So ma'am has given a very good background of what's going around. And yes, services currently account for around 3/4 of GDP in the developed economies. And innovative technology is actually changing the way work is being done. So Bangladesh Bangladesh needs to benefit from international trade by improving its game. However, there has been a heavy reliance on exports. So Bangladesh needs to go for strategic development and promotion of its services so that it can benefit and so that its economy can foster. Now, the objective of this paper, as Famida ma'am has already said, is to look at how Bangladesh can benefit from services trade in this age of digitalization. And we have also tried to explore what kind of barriers are there and what kind of steps Bangladesh needs to undertake to improve its condition in the trade arena. Now, the paper has been informed primarily from primary sources and secondary sources. So we had an expert group meeting where country experts and industrial representatives and academics had been there who provided us a lot of information. So those information helped us in shaping the way we wanted to develop our understanding of the paper, and it was also further informed by secondary sources, particularly through desk review, which involved research papers and national and global policy documents. Now, there are certain conceptual issues regarding digital trade. So the terms digital trade and e-commerce are often used synonymously. However, there are many academics actually believe that there is an absolute agreement regarding definition of digital trade and what it covers. However, some authors actually feel that digitally enabled transactions in trade in goods and services involve digital trade, which can be either digital or physically delivered, and which involve consumers, firms, and governments as stakeholders. So it can involve anything such as physical goods and also something that is transferred electronically. Now, to give you some kind of what is the difference in definition in terms of e-commerce or digital trade. So in India and United States, and also by the World Trade Organization, so we have they use the terms e-commerce where the common denominator is electronic and internet. However, there is some sort of differences in what these three countries and organizations are talking about when talking about e-commerce or digital trade. However, as I have said, the common denominator here is electronic networks or internet. So anything that any kind of order or services that is any kind of order that is placed through the internet can be termed as digital trade. However, there are certain problems with this as well, because it is very difficult to measure digital trade in services, since this paper explores the areas of digital trade in services. Now, digital trade and digital trade in services also have some sort of overlapping. So in this regard, UNCTAD came up with a good understanding of it. So they have used the terms digitally deliverable services, which is based on the concept of potentially ICT enabled services. So the main theme here is that anything that is conducted remotely over ICT networks, and it can be electronically downloaded electronically. So for example, it can be software that you can download from a cloud server. So based on this understanding, this paper also takes the notion that digital trading services means digitally deliverable services. That is any kind of service that can be transferred from using ICT network and can be downloaded electronically. Now, giving you some picture of the global and national trend of digital trading services. So what happened globally is that previously trade costs in services was nearly twice those of trading goods. However, because of advent of improved technologies, reduced policy barriers and investment in infrastructure facilities, trade costs have actually gone down by 9% between 2000 and 2017. And as digitalization is progressing, by 2025, it is predicted that the global digital economy will be valued at the global economy's GDP will, the digital economy will actually cover 24% of the global GDP. Now, if you look at this graph, you'll see that there has been an increasing trend in exports of digitally deliverable services. So globally, it has increased from 1,875 billion to over 3,000 billion. And this share is mostly, mostly boosted by developed countries, particularly Europe. However, Asia has also been increasing, and the biggest contributions comes from Singapore, China, and India. In terms of country perspective, Bangladesh's exports have been increasing. However, as the exports as a share of GDP has remained more or less pretty much same. So in 2010, it was 1.2%, but in 2019, it's 1.3%. So there hasn't been, although in terms of absolute figure, the number has increased, but in terms of share of GDP, it hasn't improved much. However, neighboring India and Sri Lanka had featured a much larger share in their respective GDPs. And due to because of this pandemic, the way services have been being conducted had been improving. So there has been a more presence of electronic modes, which is also contributing to the share of services in the GDP of many developed countries. So because of this pandemic and the increasing reliance on the digital modes, Microsoft estimates that an additional 149 million technology-oriented jobs will be created during 2020 and 2025. So that's a huge number. Now, Bangladesh has also seen some sort of changes in demand, particularly through consumption of services through electronic means, such as telemedicine and also other services as well. And A2Y expects that 10,000 new additional jobs will be created in the IT and tech companies around Bangladesh by the end of 2020. However, this needs to be rechecked since 2020 is over. So there could be a further research regarding what has been the condition in the tech industries. So as digitalization is improving and Bangladesh is also contributing in this regard, is Bangladesh actually prepared for the long run? So this particular section looks into this aspect. Now, digital preparedness is reflected in a country's digital policies and enabling environment for digital infrastructure development. Now, digital infrastructure means physical hardware which enables end-to-end information and which allows end-to-end communication through information and communication networks. And ICT infrastructures constitutes of universal internet access, connectivity, and affordability. And it is complemented by ICT education and skills. Now, as we'll talk about the later part of this presentation, we'll see that these issues are Bangladesh is actually inadequately prepared for in terms of all these issues. For example, if you look at this graph, you will see that Bangladesh is among the lowest echelons of countries, even among neighbors. Bangladesh ranks 147 out of 176 countries in the ITU-ICT Development Index, which talks about mostly the internet infrastructure, the ICT networks, their affordability, and their access. But similarly, in other indices as well, Bangladesh is performing poorly, even though it is in a relatively better condition than compared to Nepal and Pakistan. However, there is a longer way to go if its position is compared with Sri Lanka and Myanmar. Now, why is this? What's the reason? Now, one of the reasons is that access to internet is limited and awareness on internet is not encouraging. And this has been proven through surveys taken by national and international organizations. For example, Learn Asia found that 1/3 of surveyed population in the working age group are aware of internet. And only 13% of the same age group use internet. So if I reverse it, it means that around 87% of the population in that group are not adequately using internet, and nearly 2/3 of them don't have enough awareness regarding internet. Now, the internet cost is also pretty high in Bangladesh compared to other countries, particularly the neighbors. Bangladesh has the 3rd highest cost of fixed line broadband package among the South Asian countries. And in a ranking by Ookla, Bangladesh ranked 135 out of 139 in terms of mobile internet speed in October. The position was pretty bad in terms of fixed line broadband internet as well. Now, there's also some sort of digital divide in Bangladesh as well in terms of gender, because 52% of women are less likely to use internet than men. For example, a national survey also found that only 1.9% women in the age group of 15 to 49 had used computer in the last 3 months. Only 12% had used internet, and very shockingly, 1.4% had used computer-specific task, at least one computer-specific task in the last 3 months. And there are certain barriers such as social norms and lack of education and affordability, which plays a big role in deterring women from using digital services. Now, there's also limited skills as well, because the graduates from the IT related courses are not adequately skilled. So that's why there's a mismatch between what the industry is demanding and what they have. There's also a lack of research and development in Bangladesh, which is why creativity is very low. And also Bangladesh fails to retain its bright graduates. That's why there is a high flight of bright population from Bangladesh to other countries. There's also certain trade barriers as well for ICT firms to come into play, because the bureaucratic red tape such as getting access to finance and also foreign exchange limits deter many small and medium enterprises and freelancers who export services directly to international markets. Additionally, the ICT policies that Bangladesh have and other policies as well. So actually there's a mismatch of policies in Bangladesh, which leads to a very weak internet infrastructure. For example, the International Long Distance Telecommunication Service policy has a very fragmented market framework, which increases the cost for end users, because you have to take license for each type of services, and also it kind of limits foreign investment as well. Similarly, there's a high cost in sharing networks. For example, the broadband guidelines for infrastructure sharing limits the way infrastructure can be shared. However, for example, radio access network, which is which is a kind of infrastructure, which is an inactive infrastructure, and active infrastructure represents around 60% of the capital cost. But if it could be shared, the cost could be reduced. However, since it can be done, the cost has a major implication on the end users. So identifying all these problems, identifying the problems with affordability of internet, identifying the problems with issues with skills, identifying the problems with the awareness of people, and identifying the problems regarding the policy mismatch that is going on in Bangladesh, we're presenting a few recommendations that could possibly help Bangladesh benefit from digital trading services and make its mark in the world economy. So firstly, it is imperative that the gaps in policy needs to be addressed to enhance digital inclusion. So in that regard, ICT policies need to be revised through a bottom-up approach, because in the earlier slides, as you've seen, the ICT policies talks about access to ICT services. However, in the policy, it doesn't define how it should be done. And another criticism of ICT policy is that it has taken a very technocratic approach rather than doing a grassroots or bottom-up approach. So in that regard, this technocratic approach needs to be shed off, and a more bottom-up approach needs to be done. Similarly, the other policies such as the ILDTS policy and the guidelines for infrastructure sharing, those policies need to be revisited so that the structural inefficiencies these policies are causing can be removed. Most importantly, rather than a regulatory mechanism to oversee the sharing of infrastructure, more of a market mechanism should be there so that infrastructure sharing could be done and the lowering of the cost can be reflected on the users. Similarly, there's a need to create awareness and raise skills. And given that there's a number of stakeholders at play, you have students, we have firms who are demanding certain skills from the students, and there are educational institutions who are also imparting this kind of skills to the students. Now, all these things together, along with the government, needs to come up with a more of a pragmatic education policy, which reflects what the global needs are, so that the educational institution and the firms and the students, teachers, and the government are all in the same page. There's also a need for research and development to inculcate curiosity and creativity among the students. So in this regard, national education policy needs to be reviewed, and their mechanisms should be in place to incentivize this sort of research and development throughout the country in all the educational institutions. Thirdly, you need to incentivize female participation in ICT-related education and employment. As we have seen earlier, that women have limited expertise in terms of use of ICT-related tools and digital tools. And one thing that I did not mention earlier is that women are also more likely to use. More women are actually have access to mobile phones less than men. That figure has been placed earlier in the slides. So this kind of barriers actually this kind of issues limit women's access to digital tools. So, and as women represent half of the population in Bangladesh, so we are actually leaving half of the human workforce that could contribute to the economy. So in that regard, the barriers that are deterring women from participating in ICT needs to be removed through education and employment. Additionally, certain incentive mechanisms such as stipend or scholarships should be in place so that women from low-income families can have access to digital tools. There's also a need to identify financial constraints on actors involved in trading services, particularly the bureaucratic red tapes and all these regulations needs to be removed. Additionally, in terms of giving access to farms, international donors can also be leveraged and other international institutions or organizations so that they can undertake joint initiatives to provide equity and debt financing. So with all these issues said, what we have found with the paper is that there are a lot of barriers in place which are limiting Bangladesh's access to the global market in expanding digital trading services. However, we believe that pragmatic policies and efforts from the government can actually remove these barriers and enable Bangladesh to participate in the global value chain and improve its condition and go towards more economic growth and development. So with this, I end my presentation. I look forward to hearing from all the experts in the panelists and everyone who is in this dialogue today, and get informed more and learn more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kamruzaman, for this very good presentation you have managed within a very short time. A lot of issues have been dealt in the paper. So I would now straight away go to the discussion session, and as we know that we have a number of distinguished speakers today. I would now start with Dr. Ratnakar Adhikari, who is the Executive Director at Enhanced Integrated Framework, EIF, at the World Trade Organization. So, of course, Ratnakar will reflect on what has been discussed or presented in the paper, but I would also like to, pose a few questions, very simple, but one or two questions to you, because you work with a lot of least developed countries. So I also want to know that, how the LDCs are taking advantage of the technology, and how is technology playing any role, a role or any role in driving their economies. So, and are these, of course, there are various levels of preparation. Are they prepared? How much they are? And if and how the digital trading services is growing in those LDCs. And one particular issue is that you also work with the SMEs and also finance issues. So access to finance for startups, ICT entrepreneurs, and e-commerce, digital trade. These are very crucial, for expansion of digital trade in services. Especially the growth of the SMEs in the digital economy landscape is constrained due to lack of adequate finance. So how those can be removed, and also other issues of skills we have heard in the presentation. So, so those are the issues, and how your organization EIF is working towards that, and also working towards higher technological adoption in these countries. So Ratnakar, over to you.
Thank you.
So,
thank you very
we would
much.
extend about 7 to 8 minutes. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Famida, and good afternoon, everyone. And it's a very relevant and timely topic, and I commend the effort of CPD for having done this study, not only in the context of the growing digital trade in services, but also in the context of COVID-19, where things have now moved online. Most of the things that we used to consider as non-tradable are becoming tradable. And then we initially used to think that they may not be able to be delivered through digital mechanism. They are being delivered now, right? So in that context, and then, in such a moment, taking stock of progress and looking at the future potential and pitfalls with a view to devising and as well as harnessing the mitigation, the devising, the supporting a strategy, harnessing a strategy, as well as mitigating a strategy. For what I call inclusive digital trade is important. I want to emphasize this word, inclusive digital trade, here. The paper also mentioned that, but I just want to put an emphasis on that. I'd just like to make 3 points. Although there are a bit of a conceptual sort of clarity issues that I want to mention upfront, just take less than a minute to explain this, is that, e-commerce, digital trade may not be synonymous. And then there is this whole concept of fourth industrial revolution also that has been brought. So these are related, but not the same. I may not have time to explain this, but we'll be happy to explain at some other point later. So, in terms of opportunity, and you've perfectly highlighted those opportunities in terms of employment for engineers, data scientists, and people who would be involved in actual delivery of services, and the prospects of business growth, whether in the trading sector, and that's the e-commerce, the education, health, financial, and professional services. There's a tremendous potential. But one of the things that I was actually looking at the other day, and then I've written it somewhere, that in terms of ICT, transaction, Bangladesh is doing much better than the global average. I mean, if you look at the overall services, ICT services trade as the total, as a percentage of total services trade, then the global data is like global figure is 10.5%, whereas it's 14%, 13.8% to be more precise for Bangladesh. So that's an area where there's a lot of opportunity. And due to demographics, the youth population, the potential growth in the digital trade and services sector, the changing consumer preferences, and the fact that there is a huge untapped opportunity in countries, LDCs in particular, including Bangladesh, and if that is matched by the animal spirit of entrepreneurs, then there is sky is the limit, I would say, in terms of the opportunities. But then there are challenges also. When I discuss about challenges, many of those have been sort of highlighted in the paper. But I had, initially back in 2018, while looking at the issue of technology and its acceptance and adaptability in LDCs, I was, doing a bit of a research, and then I developed a framework. And this approach actually works well in the context of e-trade, digital trade also. So one is the issue of accessibility, and there the issue of infrastructure you've already highlighted in the paper, the electricity, internet, and you're not only talking about accessibility, but also the quality of internet is extremely important for the delivery of digital services. Services through digital mechanism. And it's not inclusive. And something that I want to emphasize here is that it's mostly urban, youth, affluent, and males, which are getting the, actually exploiting the advantage, and others are left out. And I really like the way you put it in the report, which says that rural students who did not have access to internet were left out from the online education and are still being left out from the online education. So something that we have to keep at the back of our mind on how to enhance inclusiveness. Then affordability. The real metric is the charge, the price one has to pay as a percentage of per capita income, and this is relatively high in Bangladesh. And if you can also look at the affordability drivers index developed by the Alliance for Affordable Internet, where Bangladesh ranks relatively better, 10th among LDCs, but countries such as Senegal, Cambodia, Rwanda, and Nepal are ahead of Bangladesh in terms of affordability. There are issues around network sharing, the limited competition, and other things that we need to sort of discuss more. Then the issue of application. This is the third pillar. It's a 3A framework: accessibility, affordability, and application. So in terms of application, you have the issues of policies, whether it's ICT policy, education skill, payment solution, privacy, competition. These are the policy related issues. But then there are skills related issues also, and you've really highlighted the skill related issues, not only the paucity of skill, but also skill mismatch. In this example, actually, I can also relate this to example of Bhutan and Bangladesh, where we conducted e-trade readiness assessment together with UNCTAD, and we found out a similar problem. So this is specific to South Asian LDCs, I guess. And finally, the problem of awareness and capacity, and you mentioned it very well, Umida. How can micro, small, and medium enterprises benefit from this? And that's also relates to inclusiveness. The third point, and I'll stop here, is what can be done. What is required? These studies are really good, to prepare the foundation, but what is required is action. And in terms of action, in working in the LDC, what I found is that ecosystem approach is the best approach, because there are so many stakeholders involved, and the issues around policy, the issues around skills, finance, and whole range of issues. So therefore, ecosystem approach, we've supported Cambodia to do to take an ecosystem approach, and that has really worked. And in terms of policy, EIF has supported e-commerce strategy development in Bhutan, Cambodia, and Nepal. And in some countries, the payment solution support has also been provided and this is basically in Africa. And Bhutan has also introduced online auctioning of commodities through our support, which is a step closer which brings Bhutan a step closer to really exporting those products online. And then skill, I have mentioned about this, but then, in terms of enhance the collaboration, the education institute, business, and government coming together is in order to be on the same page at the time of delivering the curriculum itself is important, and something that is adequately highlighted in the paper. I want to commend you for bringing that up, and this is the recommendation that was provided in by e-trade readiness assessment in Nepal and Bhutan as well. Then the other element is the awareness and capacity building of consumers, policymakers, and small and medium enterprises. So what we've done is to build capacity of small and medium enterprises in Cambodia and in South Asia, including Bangladesh. We are currently supporting digital marketing and e-commerce program. And this is being implemented by UN ESCAP, New Delhi. And I see that Dr. Rajan Ratna is also here. He made the presentation at the working group on gender and trade at the WTO on Friday together with my colleague, EIF colleague. So this is basically to provide support to women-owned SME to bring them up to speed so that they can take advantage of the opportunity. And within this, the final issue, and since you've mentioned this, is the issue of finance. There are two types of issues relating to finance. One is the issue of investing, attracting foreign direct investment, or blended finance or impact investment on bigger investment. Public investment such as infrastructure is important, but the other one is the there I can provide the example of impact investment being mobilized by firms which are involved in cloud computing and artificial intelligence, such as Cloud Factory in Nepal and Sastodil in Nepal. These companies have attracted impact investment from something called Dolma Investment Fund. And similarly, the public, private, and blended nature of finance would be important for the main investment of public investment. But then when it comes to SME financing, so, agencies like us have been, providing support or linking them up with the right, contact in order to provide those support. So, and there's a lot of potential for the SME to take advantage of this opportunity, and if they can be capacitated to take advantage, that would be the best thing. That will be the best way to promote inclusive digital trade in services as well as in goods. I'll stop here. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Ratnakar, for bringing out these pertinent issues. You have really highlighted the issue of inclusivity in digital trade. In fact, we always, we often discuss the digital divide. Technology is something, whoever owns it, he or she is powerful, and the others are left behind. So inclusivity is very important. You have mentioned about Bangladesh's comparative advantages and Bangladesh's situation relatively better than other countries. So in this respect, I would like to bring in Mr. Soyed Almas Kabir, who is the president of Bangladesh Association of Software and Information Services. So I would like to know from you also the skills and development issues, and also that we often in fact, in the paper also, we were discussing the limitations and constraints And among those is one of the limitations is the issue of skills, because the rate at which e-commerce or digital trade is growing, I think the rate is faster than our rate of skills development. And we also often hear from companies, from the industry, they talk about challenges in terms of acquiring IT professionals, digitally skilled human resources. However, on the other hand, we also see the large number of unemployed youth are waiting for finding opportunities. So where is really the problem? And also in terms of, because you deal with so many other organizations, also you have being part of the association, and they have other problems which have been mentioned by Dr. Ratnakar already, that the payment solutions and also the finance he also mentioned. So those issues are also very important. So to you, what are the major problems you find and your members also highlight? And how can the private sector organizations like BASIS can help I'm sorry, towards mitigating the gaps in this area?
Thank you. Dear all, greetings from BASIS. Very good afternoon to you all. Of course, there are many problems, actually, many challenges. We have seen a wonderful presentation, and we have seen those challenges, some of those challenges highlighted with some numbers, some data. I'll just give you a perspective from the industry, what we feel and what is happening now, and what we anticipate will happen in the near future. Of course, the trend is that the business is shifting from software applications towards software as a service. So it's actually shifting from the products to the service model. And we also, from BASIS, we are trying to encourage our member companies and, of course, the users, the local users in Bangladesh, to start using the SaaS model, the software as a service model, more and more, because it is very conducive to your cash flow. You do not have to invest on a capital expenditure. You do not have to buy or spend a large amount on a software or buy a large hardware. So you just take a subscription, and the entire software resides on cloud, and you pay a monthly subscription, or you pay by transaction. So either it is a subscription model or a transaction-based model. So these are the software as an application, software as a service, or application as a service. These are the things that we are trying to promote now. And that is why you are seeing the popularity of cloud platform, not only in Bangladesh, all over the world, that cloud platforms are actually getting more and more popular. And we too are trying to build our own platforms. Of course, there is a concern about data security and data privacy, and the ICT guideline, which was passed by the cabinet, that has mentioned that it is mentioned there that all the data has to be localized. It has to reside within the geographic area of Bangladesh. Of course, it is debatable. There needs to be a guideline, a detailed guideline of how this can be done and what data can be localized. Our recommendations have been forwarded to the government, and so we are just waiting for that. But what I was trying to say, that if this happens, then we will see more and more data centers, we will see more and more clouds in cloud platforms in Bangladesh, and that will also enhance the services and software as a services, platform as a services, application as a services, something like that. So this is the trend that we are seeing in the digital domain right now. Another thing is that, of course, we need to remember that Bangladesh is not very, I would say, we are not into R&D, much. So we are more into manual labor, and that is why we have seen the flourishment of our garments industry. Similarly, in the tech industry, we are seeing that the business process outsourcing business is becoming more and more popular, and there's a huge potential actually, because we have a lot of, a big pool of human resource, maybe semi-skilled, and that HR pool can serve these BPO tasks very efficiently. But the challenge there is, of course, the fourth industrial revolution. We know that the robotics process automation, the RPA, is actually getting more and more popular. And RPA, these software robots, they will actually replace many of these BPO businesses, like call center or those, regular jobs like graphics processing or data entry, those rudimentary jobs. So there is this challenge also. So what we need to do is we need to make our HR pool much more skilled in analytical, data analytics and decision-making skills, because that will take a longer time to, before we see the challenges by artificial intelligence, but we will have some time. So that is the area we should really focus on. We should develop the analytical skills and decision-making skills of our human resource and put them into these BPO services. And I believe that that will enhance our software and IT-enabled services export figure in a significant way. So there is that. But having said all that, as you were saying, as Dr. Fahmida was mentioning, that the skill development, and in the presentation we have also seen that there is a problem with the skill development. The main problem that we see is the gap between the academia and the industry, and this gap has been there for a long time, forever actually, and it is not only Bangladesh but everywhere. But what we need to do is we need to minimize this gap. What is really happening is about 22,000 students graduate every year in the subjects of computer science, engineering, and related other courses. But these graduates, they do not have the skill, and that is why they are not employable. And so they have to go through a training process for the next 3 months to 6 months, and then they become employable. So if we want to reduce this gap, if we do not want to lose that 3 to 6 months of their time and the nation's time, precious human resources, we need to incorporate those training, those skill development within their academic curriculum, within their 4-year curriculum. So this is one thing that academia must come forward, and we have been talking to the academia, especially the University Grants Commission, to consider this. Some of the private universities have listened to us, but I think the bigger universities, which are public, they need to get approval from UGC before they can do this. So this is very, very important to reduce this gap. Another thing, I just want to mention this. Not all e-commerce are digital services. Of course, the way we buy things, of course, that is a digital way. The showcasing is digital online, but not necessarily the rest of the business are. So if there is no digital payment done, if it is a cash on delivery, if the the buyer gets the goods in hand and then pay cash, then I wouldn't call it actually a digital service. So this has been around for more than 150 years. You all know that Sears were the first one to have a mail order catalog, And even in Bangladesh, we have seen this in the 50 years ago or 60 years ago, when you used to send money order and VPP and demand draft, and then you would get a parcel of your books or whatever. So this has been already there for a long time. So there's nothing digital about it, unless the payment, the transaction is made digitally, or unless or even better, the goods are delivered digitally, which of course not the regular goods can be done. Maybe if it is a software, if it is a service, it can be delivered digitally. Then maybe we can call it a digital service. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that. Another thing that I really want to mention is one of the challenges is the transmission cost. This was covered in the presentation. The infrastructure that we have is, the internet infrastructure that we have right now is 95 to 96% depends on the mobile operators. Only 4 to 5% is broadband internet. The problem is that the things that we want to do digitally, the services that we want to provide digitally, they actually need high-speed network. They actually need broadband network. The export targets that we mention all the time, all these, the freelancers that we actually celebrate all the time, they all need, or rather the digital commerce that we are very excited about right now, they all need broadband internet. Mobile internet will actually not help these industries or these trades to grow. So problem is the transmission cost is very high, and that is creating the digital divide between the rural and the urban areas. You will be amazed to know that in the last 10 years, or rather 12 years, the transmission cost of the nationwide telecom transmission network, the NTTNs, that has not reduced. And in some cases, that has actually gone up, even though the government has reduced the bandwidth price a few hundred times, actually, by a few hundred times rather. So the transmission cost is still high, and that is actually creating the digital divide. Also, it was, I think it was mentioned in the presentation, that the active sharing of networks must be allowed. And also the sharing of the network resources must be allowed. What is now happening is, so suppose one mobile operator, Grameenphone or Robi or Banglalink, they have their fiber optic network around the country, but they cannot lease them out to other internet service providers. They have to go through an NTTN, and NTTN does nothing but just a middleman, and it increases the cost to the end user. So they should be able to, the network owner, they should be able to lease out their network resources to other people. Whatever they have, they should be allowed to do that. I mean, the surplus resources they have, they should be allowed to share that. Another thing is, it was mentioned that in the digital divide, the less women actually use internet. Yes, it is true, because I believe that we have not been able to make people aware, including women and children, aware of the safety protocols of using internet, the do's and don'ts of internet. As a digital citizen of a digital Bangladesh, we must make everybody understand that what you have to do, what you should not do, what you can do, all those things. And I believe, once again, I have been telling this in all the forums, that just like we did a public mass campaign during the 70s about the family planning, and later in the 80s and the 90s about HIV/AIDS, we have to do that kind of in that scale, that kind of a massive campaign about the digital hygiene, about the do's and don'ts of the internet superhighway. And that is only how we can make them aware. And if we can do that, I'm sure that the usage of internet by women will be increased, who will not be discouraged to get bullied or to get teased on the internet. Another challenge about the proliferation of internet in Bangladesh is the lack of Bengali content. Of course, a lot of entertainment content are being created. The drama and the music, they are being created, but we need more content, more substantial content. So, and of course, I believe the government's plan to make all the citizen services available online, that will create a lot of content, and people will start using internet to access those citizen services. But until we do that, we really have an acute problem of shortage of localized content. And last but not the least is the digital payment, the lack of some guidelines. We have interoperability problem. It's still not interoperable. Interoperability is not still there. Of course, the work is going on, but until we have that, digital payment will not grow. Although in the last 15 or 16 months during the pandemic, we have seen in the online transaction, in digital commerce, the digital payment has actually doubled, which was 15%. It has become 30 to 35% in some cases. So that is a good sign. And that is why I really want to propose to the government to incentivize the digital transaction. This can be done in few ways. One is to provide a cashback incentive on all kinds of digital transaction, whether it's a credit card, by debit card, or by MFS. The seller and the buyer both will get 2.5%. So in total, 5% cashback will be given by the government. This is an investment, a cash incentive investment by the government for the next 3 to 5 years. If this can be done, all people actually will be encouraged to pay by digitally, and the merchants, they will be encouraged to, they will be, they would like to accept the payment digitally also. Another way is, it was in our budget proposal that all kinds of digital transaction, if it is done digitally, it should be taken out of the purview of VAT, the value-added tax. Then again, that will actually motivate people to do digital payments. And lastly, that all government's fees and service fees, that has to be made mandatory to be paid digitally only. Government should not accept all kinds of trade license fees, passport fees, driving license fees, all kinds of fees. That has to be paid digitally. So if that can be done, I think digital payment services will actually proliferate, and we will actually go towards the cashless society, that our dream. So anyway, these were my thoughts, and thank you very much for inviting me here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Almas Kabir. You have covered a lot of issues, and particularly the issues of interoperability and payments. Is big issue. We have someone from the central bank. We'll listen to him later on. But Dr. Selim Raihan, he has to go. I thought I'll bring in Bangladeshi experts later to us. We'll hear some of the South Asian experts, but Selim has to go for an urgent work. So I would now call upon Dr. Selim Raihan, who is a professor at Dhaka University at the Department of Economics and also Executive Director at SANEM. So Selim, of course, we will reflect on what you have just heard also from the paper and also from the speakers. But I have a specific question which I will pose to other South Asian experts also, many of whom are trade experts and who follow the negotiations at the WTO. As you know, that at this point in time, the issue is being also discussed at the WTO, though there is no regulatory framework or no agreement as yet. But we have, when the WTO started, in fact, the world has changed since the WTO was founded, and we are seeing the digitalization of trade, and it has an implication on the trade. So it is important that global trade system is up to date, and also that countries can exploit new opportunities and address the challenges which are faced by the countries at present. But in order to do that, there is a need to reform the rules that govern trade. And also this should be done in an inclusive manner. Inclusivity has been highlighted more than one speaker today. But we are seeing that there are a lot of disagreements among the WTO members. There is no framework for digital trade as yet. So in this context, how can WTO members ensure that the changes brought in by digital technologies will benefit and support inclusive growth? So Selim, over to you. Your thoughts.
Thank you, Famida. I must thank CPD, FES, and other organizers. And actually, I can assure my friends in the panelists that I will not actually leave the discussion. I have to attend another call, so that's why I thought that to request Famida to give me the floor. But I will listen to all the panelists, and I'll keep my speaker on. And definitely, I think it has been so far very rich discussion, especially the rich presentation too. And I must thank Famida and your colleague to bring up that very important issue. I think this is what I should term as a kind of trade of future for countries like Bangladesh. So we need to rethink. It's not only the global trade architecture, but also the domestic trade architecture. I think how we can integrate these things, in our policies and regulatory framework. But I'll just, I mentioned certain issues. I'll come back to that point. But let me first, of course, congratulate the keynote presentation, especially highlighting some of the very, very important facts. And with respect to, for example, access to internet. And Ratnakar mentioned it's not only the access, but also the quality. And now under the COVID situation, some of the studies, even some of the surveys undertaken by SANEM, it has showed that probably only 20% of the students, they have the so-called access to online education. I would say access, probably they are just connecting in a very, not a very frequent, on a regular basis, in a very irregular basis. And also there is a serious gender divide. We know that, when it comes to access to internet and other digital devices. So now, taking into account all these things, if you look at this ICT policy, I think that was referred in the presentation, we need to consider that these policies need to be dynamic. Because it's very much related to the technology and the technological revolution the way it's happening in the case of ICT and related stuff. Some even I think 3 or 4 years old policies can't be useful. So I think we need to accommodate that dynamic aspect in the policies and how on a regular basis this can be evaluated and reformulated. We talked about this in the presentation too, the very high importance of the services sectors. But at the same time, we know that when it comes to trade, services trade, and also the digital trading services, that's not really very much happening in the context of Bangladesh, and also I think some of the other South Asian countries too, especially countries, they are trying to graduate out from the LDC status. But we also need to look at the fact that when we talk about services trade and the digital trade, we should not treat them in isolation. We need to take and look at the kind of linkages they have with the rest of the economy. So I think to what extent they're also affecting the trade in manufacturing or the production manufacturing or the agriculture, whether manufacturing or the agriculture sector, they're integrated in this so-called, or what is a very high, important term, what we call this digital trade, or the services trade. So how, these linkages, are being taking place. Countries with small linkages, weak linkages, I think they may see some flourishment in the case of digital trade or services trade that will not actually have some spillover effect to the rest of the economy. For example, if I give you some numbers, actually I did in one of my papers a few years back using the OECD the Value-Added Trade Database. So I looked at the kind of what I call the manufacturing content of the services trade. And I give you one example, 2 figures. For example, in the case of China, I found that more than 20% of the, in the services, they had called it the manufacturing content. Whereas in contrast in India, it has only 6.7%. So you can see the difference. It's not only the services trade you look at, but also to what extent it has got its connection or linkages with the other sectors. Similarly, I also tried to calculate something what I call the services content in input use of manufacturing, and where I also found that India in among the South Asian countries, despite that, probably India has a very high growth in services trade. It has only 30% in services content in the overall manufacturing, and probably you may be surprised that Bangladesh has more than 40%. But probably then there comes a fundamental question. especially with respect to the productivity of the services sectors. Even if you have the services, but to what extent it's productive, it's adding much value, or whether it is what we call this digital trade or different kinds of with advanced technologies, whether that productivity is taking place, enhancement is taking place in the services sector. Now, when it comes to this technological development and this productivity enhancement, I think presentation is very much right, and especially Famida at the beginning, she also mentioned very correctly that it's not very equally distributed, the technological advancement. And when it comes to the services trade, and when it comes to digital trade, I think the problem is more acute, especially with the access to internet, access to device, which we can look at this, all these kinds of, inequality in this, technological development. I just want to highlight one of my very recent works. I tried to look at the labor share in income and also the inequality among the Asia Pacific countries, and try to kind of panel econometric framework. And I found that actually that with this technological development in the Asia Pacific countries over the last 2 decades, it led to reduction in labor share in income as well as rising inequality. So I think we need to look at that, how we encourage the technological development, and whether what kind of gear, of what kind of, I wouldn't want to use the term restriction, more of regulatory environment. I think that becomes very, very important. So finally, my final point is that for a country like Bangladesh, and I want to relate to the Famida's question on the strategy at the global level. I think for a country like Bangladesh, when it comes to this digital trade, when it comes to this services trade, there must be two-pronged strategy. One is, what Bangladesh and other countries like Bangladesh, they're doing at the global level with respect to their negotiation and their engagement at the global forum, and especially in WTO, and also what they're doing at the domestic level, especially whether are they doing their proper homework. So at the global level, I think rightly pointed out by Famida that whether we need to have certain change in the global trade architecture, especially when it comes to this digital trade, and when it comes to different rules and regulations, with a changing environment, in the digital. I fully agree with this, and I'm quite sure that negotiators like Rajan Ratna or even Ratnakar, they can talk more explicitly, and even Rashmi, she can talk more explicitly because they are very much closely involved in this kind of negotiation. But I really like to put more emphasis, and equally important emphasis, on the domestic part, especially the preparation. And here I see huge gap, and I'm very much glad to hear from Almas Bhai that whether he was rightly mentioning about the loopholes or the gaps in the policies, and also in the keynote presentation highlighted. But I was more curious to know that whether we have a proper regulatory environment in place, regulatory framework in place. By regulation, as I mentioned earlier, that I'm not really talking about restriction. Look, take the example of e-values. I know, I fully agree with Ratnakar and also Alban's by that, e-commerce and digital trade, they are not exactly the same, but they're interconnected. Take the example e-value, how this weak regulatory framework, weak regulation actually led to this kind of situation now where a large number of users of this service, they are under serious problem. And that is also creating threat for the newcomers in this business, those who really want to get into this business. And probably now what we see from the government, that initially become very relaxed, very loose regulatory environment now, and the problem is created. Many people, they suffer, not only the consumers but also the suppliers. Then it become too much restrictive. That all these things becomes a very vicious cycle where newcomers, new entrepreneurs, they become very, very they fear to get into this policy, get into this business. My final point is that for a country like Bangladesh, we need to rethink our industrial policy, because we need to integrate this services trade, digital trade, and all these regulatory issues, within our industrial policy. Unfortunately, we don't have any kind of, I would say, very inclusive or broad-based industrial policy, and we all know that it's a very narrow-focused industrial policy. Whatever we have, focusing very much or helping very much one particular sector. But we need to make it broad-based. We need to get other sectors there to have their benefit, so that they can get benefit out of it. And I think unless and until do that, we will stuck to this situation, and will not be able to get the benefit out of what I call the future of the trade for a country like Bangladesh. Over to you, Famida. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Dr. Salim Rahan, for this very pertinent issues, points you have raised, really. So I will actually, I was planning to ask some of the issues and pose this to our central bank official. I'll come back to him later on. But I would right now would like to call upon Dr. Rashmi Banga, who is the Senior Economic Affairs Officer at the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD. So Rashmi, I would like to know that, because you are working with a number of countries and you're helping, I mean, the organization you're working, so they are helping the countries in designing their digital transformation policies, like countries like Sri Lanka, Indonesia, South Africa, Ethiopia. So Bangladesh is not there. Maybe Bangladesh can, you can think of also including Bangladesh. But so there are also examples. We are discussing about many bottlenecks here. But I know also, and much better than me, is that there are a lot of learning experiences from other countries. So you have mentioned in some other places that China is a country where a lot of transformation has happened. It has really, China has been able to transform itself from an agrarian economy to the global manufacturing hub, and now a digital leader. So that scale, and someone for any country to go up to that level and scale and expertise, that will take quite some time, I guess. But I would also like to know that, can you share some of those experiences, how these countries like China had been able to excel and become a new digital leader, exceeding many of the advanced countries actually. And also some of the, with your experience, can you also make a few recommendations for Bangladesh to, so that Bangladesh can digitally transform in a better way? So we're drawing from your experience from other countries. So Rashmi, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Famida, and thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. I think very interesting discussions have taken place already. And let me congratulate the authors of the paper, very insightful paper and very timely paper, I would say, because we know digital trade is rising, and not just because of industrial revolution, but also because of the pandemic. And countries have to be prepared now to enter the digital revolution, because it's not going to go away. There are digital skills which have to be learned. There are digital infrastructure which has to be built. And again, there are digital industrial policies which have to be designed. And all these things need to be done together for a digital transformation. And on this, before I come to your question about sharing of policy experiences, I think one comment I want to make on the paper, I think paper will benefit from that. W2 has recently published a database which is called TISMOS, Trade in Services Through Mode of Supply. So it gives data for 200 countries, and it gives data on disaggregated services and mode-wise. So you can know how much of import-export Bangladesh is doing in terms of, let's say, health services, architectural services, or engineering services via mode 1. So I think that is a very useful data. And I had a very quick look at it. And what I find is that Bangladesh's total services exports in mode 1 has increased by almost 100%, from 310 million in 2005 to 636 million in 2017. But its import of total services via mode 1 has increased by almost 300%. And the services which are being imported are mainly transport, trade-related services, insurance, and financial services. while exports are telecommunication, computer information, and audiovisual services. I think this database can really give more insights and can be used by the paper to get into what services potential Bangladesh has in terms of mode 1 or in terms of the digital exports in services. Now coming to the second part, we are under the UN SDG funding. We have a project to share policy experiences, especially the successful digital policy experiences. And our key partner countries are Ethiopia, Indonesia, and Sri Lanka. And in Sri Lanka, we are working with ICTA, which is the agency mandated to design digital policies under the Office of the President. And let me just, you mentioned China. Yes, we are sharing successful experiences of China. And we know that nobody can replicate policy experience of China. But then there are some key learnings which can really help and which can be adapted to the ground realities of the countries. And let me share just a few of them. And then that will give you a flavor of what kind of policies we are looking at. The first lesson that we have learned, not just from China, but also from other countries, is that cherry picking of policies or ad hoc policies will not help in digital transformation. There has to be a national comprehensive strategy, digital transformation strategy, or you can call it comprehensive national digital transformation policy, well coordinated with subnational level as well as sectoral level policies. So you have a whole, a whole matrix where you start at the national level and which will give directions to the subnational level, which goes down to the sectoral level. And when you come to the sector level digital transformation strategies, they go down to the firm level or micro level. And both demand and supply side have to be addressed together. So it's not just how your supply of digital products increase, but also how your demand for digital products increase. For that, the ICT skills or the skills of ordering online of the consumers has to also be addressed or boosted. So this is one broad lesson that comes out from the policies of successful digital transformation policies across the countries. The second thing which comes out, I think it was also mentioned by Mr. Kabir over here, that data infrastructure, that is very important. And what we are seeing is countries who have the data regulation policies have really benefited from them. Just to give you an example, Indonesia has a data localization policy, and many big platforms like Google and Amazon and Facebook, they are taking their data out of Singapore and neighboring countries and building data centers in Indonesia so that they can process the regional data in Indonesia. So because of data localization policy, not only Indonesia is attracting more FDI, but it is also building more data centers. Because of the domestic linkages of data centers, it is also boosting the data processing skills of its entrepreneurs. So I think that is very important, that data infrastructure takes the center role, and there has to be a data regulation policy. The country has to declare sovereign right over their data. There has to be data localization policy. Now, once you own your data, then you can decide to whom you want to share your data. And data centers, every second we are generating data. And, many LDCs, many delegates over here from LDCs, they ask me that we are such a small country. Our data is not very, it's not very huge. But don't forget, you're not just going to generate data now, you're going to generate data in future, and digital revolution is not going to go away. So data centers are the factories, the new factories of digital era. So if you don't have factories, you will never be able to manufacture the digital products and digital services. And with the new technologies that are coming, like 3D printing, consumer data will be absolutely necessary. Also, there is this narrative that data centers are very costly, they use a lot of electricity, but there is new technology which is leading to data, which is called, edge data centers. These are small data centers with high power of processing, storing and processing data, and they have to be near the consumers. So small data centers, low-cost data centers, which are environmental friendly data centers are now coming up, and I think Bangladesh can really benefit by investing a lot in data centers and having a policy with respect to building data infrastructure. And then another thing which I really want to highlight, which has been proved to be very successful in small countries like Ethiopia, is digital innovation hubs. These are the hubs where all digital startups are hosted by the government and then incentivized. Then they are, right now what is happening is you have digital startup, they come up with a digital innovation which is sold to big platforms like Facebook or Amazon or Google. So the country loses the digital innovation. But some countries are converting their SEZs into digital innovation hub. They are hosting all the digital startups there, and then they are encouraging their SMEs to go to these digital innovation hubs for digital solutions. Now, an SME does not know how to digitalize its production process or what part of its production process can be digitalized. So it can go to this digital innovation hub. A digital startup can invent or innovate a digital solution for that SME. And in the process, it's a win-win situation. And government can also incentivize, saying that if you come up with an idea against $1, we will put in $3. So this kind of incentive schemes is definitely required. And one more example on e-commerce platform, just to tell you that China has a positive list approach on its e-commerce platform. While we allow anything and everything to be imported via our e-commerce platforms, China regulates the imports on its e-commerce platforms. So there's a positive list of goods that can be imported via e-commerce. So it is really regulating, it is using its tariff regime over here in regulating the imports through e-commerce platforms as well. And secondly, in boosting the exports or on its e-commerce platform, China has a national e-commerce platform called Kiku. Kiku is operating in many African countries, but selling only Chinese products. So these are some very small nuggets, I would say, which can help countries a lot in terms of designing their e-commerce policies. And coming to the last part of it, on the WTO question that you asked, Celine, what is happening is that at the WTO, there are some countries which are negotiating digital rules outside the WTO. So this is the joint statement initiative on e-commerce, but this is not the part of WTO. Within WTO, you have a work program on e-commerce. And I think it is very important to understand that the digital rules which are being negotiated outside the WTO and JSI, these are mainly being designed by the developed countries. And they will not give enough policy space, both in terms of fiscal policy and regulatory policy, to developing countries to develop their digital economies. Developing countries need the same policy space that was available to the developed countries when they were initiating their digital economy. But in these rules, the data has to flow freely. Governments cannot have data localization policies. The governments cannot ask foreign firms to share their source code, but source code is nothing but digital technology. So if you do not ask foreign firms to share their digital technology, then how are we possibly going to have digital technology transfers? So in the chat box, I'm going to just share the link of my paper on JSI on e-commerce, implications for the South. And this picks up each and every digital rule which is being negotiated, the proposals which are on the table, and what are the implications for the developing countries and also for countries like Bangladesh. And I think it is very useful. It will be very important to preserve policy space. So I want to stop there and I'll be happy. And let me congratulate you. I think it's a very timely work that you have undertaken and a very insightful way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rashmi, for your insights. In fact, all the speakers have shared their insights, which are so useful. And in fact, our paper is just a work in progress. It is just the initiation, but as we all know that so much to be incorporated and so much to understand and also followed and take up from the policy making process. So now I would like to come to Mr. Misbah Haq, who is the General Manager, Payment Systems Department, Bangladesh Bank. So Mr. Mohammad Misbah Haq, so we heard all the speakers have mentioned regarding the payment. Payment is a very important component. And also we know that for smooth digital trade, payment is is the medium. I mean, one of the medium, but there are challenges. There are international transaction limits. Experts spoke about the limits for outbound payments in foreign currency. In many countries, there is a limit. But of course, we understand that there are serious concerns with regard to capital flight also. And because if, if we do not restrict, then, we don't know how it's going to be used. So from that point of view, the policymakers restrict that. But on the other hand, we also hear from those who are involved in business that these are really, constraining factors. Many industries, they have to import, they have to procure imports from international sources, and many who also travel outside. For example, if someone goes abroad regarding, for medical services, payment becomes a huge issue if it is, above the limit. So, but again, as I've mentioned, that you have to, as policymakers, the government has to strike a balance between these two, that, between the limit and also the the opening up. But for customers, smooth payment is one of the important issues, important concerns. But on the other hand, we also, as Dr. Salim Rai had mentioned about some of the issues at the local level. Nowadays, just for the last couple of days, we are hearing a lot of news on the, key e-commerce, their governance issues, and also in the absence of any legal and regulatory mechanism, how these e-commerce platforms can be made accountable. That's a big issue. So what I'm trying to say, that there are a lot of challenges with regard to this digital trade, be it for the domestic market or be it for the international market. So how how Bangladesh Bank is looking at this issue, how you ensure cybersecurity, and why are the regulatory measures which are in place, which are restricting for some point in time, what policy measures do you envisage in view of the growing demand for digital trade?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me in this occasion. Can you hear me?
Yes, very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good afternoon to all of you. There are many distinguished panelists in this discussion, and the timing of this discussion cannot be better than this one because of the last development of last few weeks regarding eValley, Alicia Mart, all the e-commerce sites, and basically the pandemic period, where the question of sustainability of our livelihood is in a question right at this moment of time. So I'll not focus on the technology part of your study. Those have been adequately covered by other discussion. I'll rather put some inputs on the payment sides, that as many of the panelists has touched upon that area, and you have raised some questions that how we can find out the right balance between the innovation and the regulation. So most probably I'm the only one representing the regulator in this session. So all the responsibility is with me, that I understand. Regarding payment, you know that this digital trade-in service is growing, and we are seeing then an upcoming trend in the country. Right at this moment of time, the total cross-border IT-enabled service amounting to 1.1 billion USD right at this moment of time, and 4,500 registered software firms are there, and out of these firms, 43% are having both local and foreign trades. 48% of them are exclusively operating in the country, local market, and 9% of them are having only foreign markets. So this, and according to Oxford Internet Institution, Bangladesh is the second largest labor supplier of the IT enabling service in the world. So this shows the potential of the market that we are operating right at this moment. Regarding the payments, I'll divide it in two parts. One is the domestic payments, another one is the cross-border payments. Regarding domestic payments, yes, Mr. Almas Kobir has pointed out the issue of interoperability. I want to explain the current scenario. We are putting too much emphasis on the interoperability. We are saying no interoperability is there. It's not fully true. We are only missing the interoperability between the MFS providers. Regarding bank to MFS, you have the interoperability. You can bring your money from your bank account to MFS account. And the cards, those are interoperable. All the bank accounts are interoperable. Internet banking is interoperable. So you don't have any issue of interoperability in that area. But only in terms of MFS, yes, one MFS is not interoperable with another MFS. We are working on it, and we are confident that we will be able to bring this interoperability within a few months. Regarding the payments, interoperability doesn't have any impact on the payments because you have the aggregators, say for example, the SSL Commerce are there, who can receive any sort of payments on behalf of their merchants. So these payments will not be hampered for the interoperability issue. So that is one issue, that the domestic payments, we can say there is an end-to-end payment ecosystem where you can make any sort of payments from one medium to another medium. So that is the payment ecosystem in case of domestic e-commerce. One question can be there, why people are still relying on cash on delivery system. That actually the problem is in many other aspects, like the firm is not having any registration, then they don't have any merchant account, they don't have any relationship with banks or financial institutions. You know, the F-commerce is dominating the e-commerce trade in the country, but most of them are not organized in that way. So these are the problem that we are seeing in the market, that of not receiving the digital access and digital payments. Recently, we have issued one micro merchant policy, onboarding policy. We are expecting that this policy will be able to bring some of these small merchants in the digital payment ecosystem. So these are the things that we are doing in the low domestic areas. And in the international part, as you rightly mentioned, that many of them needs to import their inputs. Any basis member can import $40,000 in a year without having any formal LC or other things. They can make the payment through cards. They can make payment through their international wallets, and they can use this money for their purchasing their inputs and other things. Even a member of the ECAB association can spend $10,000 in a year to bear their business expenses. So these are the policy guidelines that has already been issued. We have issued the circular that no person will require any EXP form or export EXP form to export any software services or IT enabled services if it is within the 10,000 USD limit. So you can export anything which is below $10,000 without any EXP form or any other thing, and you can receive the payment through any means, through card, through MFS account, through your OPGSP account, online payment gateway service providers account. So those are already there. These has been given to the entrepreneurs. Yes, if there is a requirement of further enhancement, if there is a business case, definitely central bank is there to reconsider those limits. Regarding, you have mentioned regarding the medical treatment fee and other things, I can say that yes, these are free, but you need a prior approval of the central bank, and you can spend any money that you need for those treatment requirement. Just I want to mention that the life of a regulator is very difficult in this age, because too much regulation should restrict the innovation, and too less regulation can create the problem that we are seeing for e-valley and other e-commerce site. So this is the dilemma of the regulators. If we want to become too strict, everybody will say, okay, you are restricting the innovation. And if we become too lax, then you will again blame us that this is because of you that has been raised. But you know that we are always looking for the right balance between the regulation and innovation. Yes, we have given some regulations regarding e-commerce and other things in domestic area. There were some regulatory provisions in Consumer Protection Act, Competition Act, and other things. But sometimes all the regulations doesn't work in the way that we are perceiving to be worked. So that is one area. We have introduced one policy that those e-commerce marketplace who are not having their own product but selling the product of others, they cannot take advance payment from the customer, and they will receive the payments from the aggregator or the payment gateway when they actually deliver the products. So those are the regulations that we have given in the country. But you know that there is a long-term discussion also that what would be the long-term e-commerce policy for the country. That the Commerce Ministry, we and other relevant stakeholders are now working. Regarding access to finance, you have mentioned in your study that this is an issue for SME and other things, other small enterprises. And Bangladesh Bank is also having several round of programs for these SMEs. You know, there are many refinance schemes where there is a mandatory requirement of certain portion to be disbursed to the women entrepreneur. And we have issued the micro merchant policies where we want to bring all these SMEs under the digital payment ecosystem, and that will create another opportunity. If we can bring them under digital payment ecosystem, then we can generate a huge volume of data regarding their business volume, regarding their business trend and their product line, which will help the bank and financial institution to develop right kind of credit product for these institutions. That is we are foreseeing, but unfortunately, immediate after the introduction of that micro merchant policy, the COVID pandemic started, and that's why the whole thing get delayed. We are not receiving the right kind of response from the market at this moment of time. Mr. Almas Kabir has pointed out a valid issue that regarding creating the digital acceptance point. One issue is becoming the cost, that the merchant has to bear the merchant discount rate and pay some money to the aggregator and the gateway. And who will bear this cost? And the merchant, if you consider the micro merchant, receiving 0.5% less than the actual money is becoming an issue. He is saying, okay, why if I receive it in cash, I receive 100% of my payment. If I receive in digital form, I receive 99.5% of that money. So that creates a mental barrier for them to accept the digital payment. So that can be one area where we can do some policy intervention, whether we can reimburse that money or whether we can create fund or subsidy to encourage the people to receive to accept digital payment. So this is the area where the regulators are working. From the central bank's point of view, we are saying that we are ready to do any sort of regulations that will enhance the market. But again, I am emphasizing on one issue, that sometimes we are putting too much emphasis on a wrong point of focus. Like at some point of time, in my experience, then this is my experience, market is responding that, okay, for this reason we are not able to achieve this goal. Then we relax that thing, we made the regulation, removing all those barriers, but the result is not coming. Then we ask them, okay, what happened? You told us that, okay, after this you will be able to achieve the goal, but it was actually not happen. The problem is they focused on a less important area rather than the actual one. So this is one thing I'll request, that I request everybody, that every findings, the bottlenecks and other things, the impediments, has to be researched very well. Otherwise, you will guide the regulator in the wrong direction, and even after getting the regulation, you will not get the result. But thank you very much. You have given an exhaustive study on the digital trade in finance, and rightly pointed out some of the issues. One issue is that you have discussed digital inclusiveness of the people, but I'll rather request that you should also put some special emphasis on the digital financial literacy also, because this is one area the people should know how to use their money digitally in getting the benefit of digital commerce. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Misbah Haq. A lot of policy-related issues we heard, and it's really regulation versus innovation. This is really a challenge, and striking a fine balance between these two it's crucial. And we can imagine the challenges you face from the policy making aspect. Now, I would like to request Mr. Mohammad Mahbubur Rahman, who is the Chief Executive Officer at the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation Limited, Bangladesh. So, Mr. Mahbubur Rahman, financial institutions such as your banks, so these are part and parcel of trade, actually, because they are not only engaged in supporting trade in goods, but also trade in services. And you have been in the banking sector for long. So over the years, what changes have you seen in terms of a transformation towards digital trade? Of course, so you have seen that a lot of trade over the years, Bangladesh's trade volume has increased, but at the same time, different types of trade has increased also. So now, see, for example, compared to 10 years back, so what would be the ratio of digital trade and physical trade? So, or you can just, maybe not possible to give a ratio properly, but just a trend you can provide us. And also, secondly, that since you are engaged with an international bank and you have to rely on lot of digital payment services. So, but then again, we are hearing that this is such a risky and sensitive area. So how you are ensuring that security? We are hearing the cyber security, which is very, very, it can be dangerous too. I mean, Bangladesh has gone through those experiences also. So if you can share some of your experiences, and what, according to you, what bottlenecks do you also face in terms of facilitating trade through the financial organizations like the banking sector?
Assalamu alaikum. Many thanks. First of all, apology for joining late because I had some CEO conferences also happening virtually. So I joined from the time when Almaz Bhai started speaking, and I was quite fascinated with the pointers right from the beginning of Almaz Bhai and subsequent speakers, including Mr. Salim Rahan, then probably international speaker, one of the international speakers from our regulators, central bank, it's quite fascinating. So I will actually try to be very brief for the interest of the time. Look, first of all, this is such a pertinent subject, not only from a digital or technology perspective, but also from a very the ever increasing volume of the trade that Bangladesh is now at this moment experiencing. To be frank, I mean, trade GDP ratio is close to 30%. At this moment, we are hovering around exporting, but I'm talking about only international trade, not the domestic necessarily. But if you see that export import actually has been hovering around $90 billion. So if that puts into the context, then of course it's close to 30% of our GDP. So it's important and it's continue to remain important. Coming back to the point about the digitization, I'll attribute these things, especially from a technology point of view, and we'll start with a very positive note. The reason that I wanted to start with a positive note that Mr. Mesbah also mentioned, I was very happy that he remains very flexible and very open about some of the suggestions. But at the same time, just give you an example. Since Corona striked from March, I mean, we are the largest trade bank. I don't want to go into the details in Bangladesh, and we handle quite a substantial part of the international trade. 90% of our staff members and the trade operations are working from home. And we performed all the transactions with 10% of our staff members being in the office and 90% from home. So until we were enabled with the technology, it could not have been possible. And it's also have been possible because we got support from the regulators, we got support from the customers. So why do I say this? I say this because the affinity, the openness, the willingness to perform in a digitized manner or in a technologically enabled manner has been the positive outcome out of this pandemic. What has been the trend has been fast-tracked during this period. I think that is something that we all have experienced in our day-to-day life as well as in our professional life. I'm speaking from the office, but in a 30,000 square feet office, I think we are only 10 persons are now doing office and everybody is from home. So that signifies the willingness, ability, flexibility, and also importance, especially from the forward-looking way that how the transactions and services and the international trade will actually take place. Then to your point, to your question about that, what has been the trend? I think it's the task. I would say the last 2-3 years has been a very transformative year for the digital transformation of the trade. Why do I say this? I don't think that anything has taken place through the digital ecosystem 5 years back. Today, to my example, what I cited about the working from home also tells that how we are enabled. I'm talking about HSBC, but in most of the cases, I think other international bank or international outfit is like that. So to put the percentiles, in terms of our own system and technology, we are 100% enabled. But what percentage of our transactions are end-to-end sort of digitally taking place? I think close to 40%. And I'm talking about only not the industry or not the sector, but I'm talking about my platform of HSBC, which, as I said, that we are the largest trade bank in Bangladesh. So it has been also possible. I think because Mr. Mesbah is also here, there are 2-3 aspects. One, that what opportunities are brewing because the digital industry is growing. So that is an opportunity perspective. The other second perspective is that what are the technological enablement will need to take place to take that from a national perspective. I think that's the second part, that how the existing transactions will be under the technology or will be through the digital technology. That's the second part. The first part, actually, the whole digitization or the digital industry itself is creating some opportunities. I'm just giving an example. I mean, it's not in necessarily Bangladesh, but one of our group sites actually financed receivables, which is arising out of somebody is having to offer a cloud-based solutions or marketing solutions to the multinationals, and his billing is based on the number of clicks, and we had actually financed their receivables based on those business. So it is a new business that has not been there. When it comes to Bangladesh, it's mostly the merchandise trade, not necessarily service trade. And from the perspective of merchandise trade, through the digital channels or technological channels, I would say, of course, the ICC and the governance you mentioned about what is the global governance of this trade. Of course, is one of the part would be played by ICC, and then the governance and documentations are already in place. And happy to share that in recent meetings with AD Forum meeting, when it comes to the very first blockchain transaction also has been conducted by HSBC, and it has been agreed with central bank that the e-presentation of the documents are allowed, and it doesn't have any conflict with the current procedures that central bank is going to. And Mr. Mesbah, if possible, that you can elaborate subsequently, but it is a good sign. Thirdly, I would say that when it comes to the business opportunities, somebody mentioned about that how the mobile financial services are being interfaced. Domestically, a large portion of our people are unbanked, and now the people who are banked and having a bank account also requires MFS account interface because they need to pay. And if they need to pay, then of course that unbanked people also has to be paid through these mobile financial services. But if somebody is trying to make payments from his own bank account, he also needs to have this interface. Now, I'm putting this example because that is also going to come when it comes to the sort of an SME transactions. And I think it is possible for the state platform also to have interface like mobile financial services. The second part, when it comes to the international trade, today I saw that there are emphasis on the situation that the global transportation actually is now showing that some of the liners are not necessarily are coming because of the corona. Some of the freights have gone up. So that also tells us that how the B2C transactions actually will take place in course of time. And Almaz Bhai can also elaborate on that one, because I see that after, of course, I'm not saying that it is mutually exclusive, but I think Bangladesh's potential to create a transactions ultimately from B2C, that the consumers actually will be shipped out directly from Bangladesh. I actually see that happening, even if it takes 3 to 5 years time. But if that happens, then of course our overall ecosystem of the digital transactions, I think one of the speakers mentioned about it's not about ad hoc, it's not about one-off, but it has to be a national steering committee. But yes, we do underscore that requirement, but at the same time, the pockets of the transactions actually create some examples of what requires to be done. So from that perspective, I think the digital trade or the transformation has to happen. And if that has to happen, then the coordination, because our ecosystem is having interface with customs, having interface with the National Board of Revenue, having interface with all the systems that we put up, such an example like Asikuda. So everything has to be a little more integrated. Now, how this integration and how this coordination will take place, I'm sure it is not something that I'm talking anew, and everybody understands, and under the helm of ICT and some of the enablers have already taken some good progress. and I think it will progress further. Your second question was regarding the cybersecurity. The more technology that we'll use, I think it is given that the security and the threat on the cyber will increase. And it is not going to be static. Predominantly, I would say the provider has to have that responsibility, not necessarily the user, but of course it is a mutual responsibility, but whoever are going to provide should have that kind of, and I'm not an IT expert, but that kind of firewalls and the global expertise has to happen. The simple statistic that I have come across probably a few months back, that every day there are 80,000 cyber attack is happening, maybe around the world, if not more. So if that happens, then of course the cyber attacker are also going to sort of like a shape up to create new modus operandi to breach that firewall. So it has to be quite significantly enabled so that the dynamics of the growing threats of cyber is addressed. That will also come, I think, within the overall governance, like your information security, because they will always look for some of the clues. So like I'm just giving that our, say, USB usage in our bank is prohibited. So how you create not only the technological governance, but also your overall governance of information sharing, your technology, do's, don'ts, that has to be there. And other thing which that I think Almaz Bhai also mentioned about the AI, the use of the AI. We need to be preemptive about what could be the threats coming in the future. If we want to be preemptive, I think at this moment, investing in advanced AI-powered security tools are going to be used so that we do not react. We rather give a proactive measures to address those things. The training and other stuff is ongoing. If we want to create people expertise, I think it has already been a good progress in that areas. And I would say that it has to be international standard, because the cyber attackers are not going to be necessarily local. They are actually equipped with very, very international. So they will look for the loopholes. So whether we create our own cloud or data locally, we got to see that, how the ease of doing business has to be facilitated. We cannot afford to have another sort of an situations just by having a locally enabled. And I'm not ruling out that is not a possibility, but if we do that, we have to be very sure that what goods look like from an international standard, not like just only a local standard. And I'm not saying that with all due respect, the local standard can be international standard. Of course it can be, but we just got to be a bit careful about that one. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mahbubur Rahman. Really very insightful, and some of the important suggestions and recommendations. I'm sure the policymakers would be able to use those. I would now, we still have 3 speakers from South Asia, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and India. So I'm sorry I have to keep you waiting, but I'm sure that we're waiting for a better, for something good. But I know how busy you are, all of you are. So thank you very much for, for being so patient and staying with us. I would now like to call upon Dr. Dushni Uirakun, Executive Director, Institute of Policy Studies at the Institute of Policy Studies in Sri Lanka. So Dushni, you heard all the discussions. A lot of has been discussed, but I really want to hear the Sri Lankan experience. What is the trend, and what opportunities and the challenges, and how the government of Sri Lanka is overcoming or tackling those challenges. So over to you, Dushni.
Thanks, Famida, and I'm going to be very brief. I think so much has been said that there's not much to be added. Let me congratulate you and the CPD team for bringing out this publication. I think it's a very, very timely report to bring out at this juncture. During the immediate sort of, pre-COVID-19 period, there were concerns that, trade wars and other kinds of tensions on deglobalization kind of would all merge with the COVID-19 related supply side disruptions, and we would then proceed to a phase of deglobalization. But I think the outcome has been that global trade has been much stronger than was earlier anticipated, and we don't talk so much of deglobalization anymore. Globalization is proceeding, but what is also very clear is that it is going to be of a different shape and form. And the main driver that is reshaping the global sort of trade agenda and the trade recovery process is, of course, digital trading services. So I think to have brought out a study at this point that looks at Bangladesh's opportunities and challenges in this evolving context deserves our congratulations. Now, in terms of the relevance of the digital trade in services to Sri Lanka, when I read that report, I could have just replicated Sri Lanka with Bangladesh, and we pretty much face the same set of challenges. Clearly in your report, it did come out that marginally, some of the other South Asian countries are doing better on some of those indicators, but more or less the same set of challenges are before us. And again, during the recent COVID-19 experience, it was very clear to us whether in the delivery of education or health or in the delivery of social protection, financial services, that we are still grappling with certain problems, certain policy gaps, etc. And that these have to be taken note of and addressed, because the future of trade is going to be very much based on digital services and e-commerce, etc. Now, opportunities to me are quite clear, and I think that came out in the report as well, that there has been a surge of investments in remote working, and that's not going to change. For instance, where if we had an engineering problem, an engineer would physically cross borders and come and fix it. Now it is going to be that we will have remote presence. So I think in that context, there was a lot of commentators who also pitched in on the skills issue. What we have done at IPS, for instance, is looking at our labor market statistics. My colleague, her, Nisha, they have looked at where the demand is for certain occupation groups that can provide these kinds of remote working. What are the skills gaps? And the initial set of findings do suggest that those with higher skill sets, etc., stand to benefit. Women also stand to benefit because they are in occupation groups that can use digital and technology to get ahead. But at the same time, what came out in some of the work that we've done, and I saw that even very clearly in the Bangladesh study, is that there are disparities, gender disparities in access to ICT infrastructure, ICT skills and competencies, etc. So there is a internal, inclusive, if you want to pursue that path, considerable policy gaps that need to be taken on board at the national level. Going beyond country experiences, I think we are also seeing this at the multilateral, at the global level, that advanced countries have been able to use their digital technologies, etc., to deal with COVID-19. When we look at the uses and impact of technologies in the COVID-19 period, you clearly see how low and middle income countries are struggling to bridge that gap that's opening up between developed and developing countries. Now, if we therefore look at digital trading services, it has to be looked at as a broader component of our trade policy, and how we have to look at how it interacts with our skills policy, how it interacts with our infrastructure policy, how it interacts with our efforts to promote innovation, etc. But at the multilateral level, I feel that when we, I think Rashmi also mentioned that there is the problem of getting to grips with the regulatory mechanism that all countries can agree to. Clearly, developed and developing countries will have very different interests. And to date, I think countries that are engaged in looking at e-commerce and digital regulatory aspects can't even agree on what is actually a digital product. For instance, if you produce a book digitally and make that available, does that go as a trade in goods, or does that go as trade in services? It has impacts and implications on tax policy. So there's a whole host of issues at the global level that needs to be addressed, and these are to date unresolved. And one second important issue that came up, I think, in some of the commentators touched on, is also the issue of data. Now, developing countries are generators of data, but we may not always have access to that data. There is also concerns about misuse of data privacy, or intellectual property, as well as on digital security. So at the multilateral level, I think Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and other South Asian countries need to study what's happening and propose policies that ensures that our interests are also being secured. Now, in terms of the progress, most of the progress that's happening is happening through regional trade agreements. And I think that, in the case of South Asia, that's not going to be a route that's going to be very productive. We've struggled even to get somewhere, even with trade in goods. So at national level, I think it's within control for us to make sure that our regulatory regimes are in place and prepared to benefit from the shift to digital trading services and e-commerce platforms, etc. But negotiating at the multilateral level, I think we've given it very little thought, very little technical preparation and capacity building in most of our countries. And if this is something that can perhaps be given some leadership at regional level, as is happening in many other regional blocs, then I think that's the better sort of way for us to be prepared to take on this challenge in the coming years. So I'm going to stop there, Famida.
Thank you very much, Dushni. You have brought in another. You have brought in another perspective. At the regional level, there is a lot to lot to be done. There's a huge regional perspective on the digital trading services also. So time is running out. So I would now request Dr. Pushpa Sharma, Executive Director of South Asia Watch on Trade, Economics and Environment, Southie, to share his perspective on the subject.
Thank you, Dr. Famida. Thank you, everyone, waiting till late. Perhaps many things have been covered already. There is very little, I think, that I can add value to. Of course, I probably can add something from Nepal's perspective. That would be like an experience sharing about where Nepal is, what Nepal is doing so far. To begin with, congratulations to Famida for the study, very timely, as it said already. I also wanted to pick up on what Dr. Adhikari had said earlier about the study. I think if there is some conceptual clarity in the beginning of the study, perhaps that will make it even better in terms of what we are looking at. Because when we talk about the digital trade or say services trade in the digital age, then I think there is a bit of a difference to exactly what we want to look at. For today's discussion, I was actually looking at services trade in particular, and what's happening to services trade in the digital age, that is in terms of the progress that has been made in terms of digitalization. So to talk about services in particular in the context of Nepal, actually services is very important because the sector's contribution to the GDP overall is more than 60%. So that says that services is a very important sector for Nepal's economy. But when we look at the sectors that are contributing to this GDP figure from services, it's mostly the traditional ones like the construction, retail, wholesale, health, education, all that. But perhaps there is a possibility that these kinds of services subsectors can be digitalized and traded in the days to come. When you look at the trade part of services from Nepal, comparing with what we do in terms of goods trade, because the goods trade itself is in a very pathetic situation, we see that our services export of 1.6 billion US dollars, which is still very small, but compared to our goods export, that is almost double. So we see that there is some prospect over there. But then we definitely have to look at what kinds of services we are exporting and whether there are these possibilities of digitalizing these services or adding value to these services so that we can trade them through digital means in the days ahead. So in that context, looking at some of the initiatives that Nepal has taken, of course, like Nepal has the National ICT Policy 2015, and also in 2018, Nepal developed the Digital Nepal Framework. This particular framework, it talks about the 8 different sectors of the economy and how digitalization can be embedded in these different sectors so that they contribute to the country's economic growth. Well, I mean, these initiatives focus mostly at the domestic level, not particularly in terms of trade. But then there are always possibilities that when you have a strong foundation at the domestic level, then perhaps you can also go beyond border in terms of trade. So what we see at the moment is that there have been some progress in terms of services trade through digital means in terms of some of the successful companies they are doing quite well in terms of developing digital products and exporting them like software and others. BPO is one area where Nepal has been doing well, but there is always a chance of doing better. But as one of our speakers said today, that there might be possibilities of BPOs being taken over by robotics and others in days to come. These are the kinds of things that we really have to be concerned about and then move ahead with the time. As Salim also said, this is a very dynamic area actually. You prepare a policy, in 2 years' time, the policy becomes redundant, obsolete. So you have to keep on, having that dynamism in the policy, having dynamism in the policy makers themselves about how you bring about those changes, dynamism in the education sector. So when you talk about the education sector, I mean, it's really a problem that Nepal still, I mean, like basic literacy rate itself is only 68%. So in that kind of a context, when we talk about, digitalization of trade, especially services, I think there's a very long way to go. Taking that aside, even if you look at the IT graduates, and this is very similar to, I think, the Bangladesh experience, like Nepal produces almost 5,000 to 6,000 IT graduates every year. But then the studies have found, and I think this has been also stated in the e-trade readiness assessment, that these graduates that come out of the IT colleges, they lack specialized expertise and they become unemployed unless they again go for further trainings. So these kinds of issues need to be looked at at a very basic level, and those are the areas where I think focus has to be made in terms of developing the required skills, knowledge, and education in these graduates. The other things regarding infrastructure, I think very well covered. We can replicate that very well from the study from Bangladesh itself. The cost of internet is still high. Of course, like in terms of electricity, if we compare Nepal's electricity access even with the world, Nepal has done pretty well because the electricity access is more than 80%. But the question is about quality. It's about the reliability of this infrastructure. Unless they are reliable, only having accessibility in those numbers doesn't make much sense. So there are areas that need to be, looked at. Similarly, the issues of innovation and entrepreneurship. Of course, like the startups have started coming up, the government is also focusing on startups and providing companies that kind of a that facility in terms of developing entrepreneurship. Even the private sector is coming up, as Dr. Adhikari said. A few of the companies through the impact financing, they have been making good progress. So some examples are there, but these have to be scaled up. And there are these regulatory issues and other things that we surely have to look at in terms of scaling them up. And because of the short of time, I don't want to go very long, but the final thing that I would want to touch upon, and this has also already been said, is the issue of inequality. I mean, in terms of the digital divide, when we look at the digital divide at a very higher level, of course, the digital divide between the countries itself is an area of concern and where the LDC really have to look into. But if we look at the digital divide, the inequality within the country itself, that is another area where we have to look at. Otherwise, given the way the digital development is taking place, we will be going forward towards more unequal societies that might bring more social problems in the days to come. So that is one of the very important issues that every country has to look into as we are moving towards the ease of digitalization and having more services trade through digitalization. So in the interest of time, Pamida, I'll stop here. Perhaps we can discuss more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pushpa Sharma, for highlighting various aspects of course, the issue. The conceptual clarity is very important. Actually, while we were doing that study, it's very difficult actually to decipher. So what is digitally delivered and what is digitally enabled? All these concepts are there, of course. So we will, as you have recommended, and some other speakers, so we'll have to put that up front. We have done, but probably it is not clear enough. That's a very good suggestion. Now we have Dr. Priyadarshi Das. He is the Associate Professor, Research and Information System for Developing Countries, RIS, India. So, Dr. Das, I think as we all know that compared to other South Asian countries, India is ahead of other countries in terms of digital progress. And we have seen already, much before the other countries, a lot of startups and also digital services have flourished. So what policy measures had really contributed to that? And how has the digital trade in services had expanded over time compared to digital trade in goods? So, and we have also discussed, all the speakers have discussed and touched upon many issues, including trade facilitations, payments issue, logisticals issues, cybersecurity skills, data, access to data, data privacy, misuse of data. So how India is dealing with this, and what experience can be, taken by the other countries? And of course, it's not all countries are facing challenge, and what are the challenges also faced by India, and how India is dealing with those. Over to you, Dr. Das.
Thank you, Dr. Khatut. I hope you are able to hear me. Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
And I can also see Professor Mustafizur on screen. Good evening, sir. So in the interest of time, what I'll do, I'll just confine to the key points that I thought of mentioning. As you rightly mentioned, these digital platforms are growing, and there has been explosive growth in recent years. But if you see the pre-COVID times, the service orientation was actually happening at a rapid pace in South Asia. The book by Ijaz Ghani and others, which I myself reviewed for South Asia Economic Journal some 10 years back, that time itself, we were witnessing a kind of symptom of rise of the services sectors, leapfrogging the manufacturing sector. But now that we are talking about trading services in the digital age, this digital technology is actually driving the force. So I'll take 1 minute only on this aspect, which Mr. Rahman very nicely explained. What is happening is actually the domestic consumption of services has increased significantly because of the spread of digital technologies. For example, India was exporting software services before COVID in the end of 2000s, and it was one of the leading suppliers of software services. Despite of or regardless of the rate of adoption of digital technologies within the country. But in addition to exports, what is happening now, the demand for services has grown domestically. It is because of the penetration of internet, the growing penetration of mobile telephony, and in addition to that, the payment solutions that have come. The payment solutions have made the transactions easy, affordable, and to a certain extent also say predictable. For example, if you make a transaction, you can see that it happening in a couple of hours. So, for example, a bank transfer. So what are those drivers of the services trade that I'll briefly mentioning? So for example, the spread of mobile telephony. The mobile telephony is trading at a cost of say few dollars, say $3 or $4. You can get a mobile set, which is not, of course, would have the advanced features, but it can at least be used for internet for making the calls. There you are actually doing the transaction, and it is reaching the rural areas. So what is happening? The greater awareness about internet-based services. For example, the success of direct benefits transfer scheme of Government of India, where all the transfers by central government are reaching to the account holders of Jan Dhan program, Prime Minister Jan Dhan program, where you have a bank account. The people earlier who were disconnected from the formal banking system are having a bank account. So they are getting educated every day about the internet-based transactions they can do. So that is also creating a demand for financial services. So if you see the financial services segment, this comes after third or fourth sector in India's services exports, and that is growing at a rapid pace. In addition to that, what is happening in terms of the ease of doing a transaction? So, for example, Paytm, all different types of e-wallets, you have actually multiple options to explore. So one can go say physically to a shop and do the transaction. So if I can mention a number, the transactions in India, the mobile transactions, the value of transactions through United Payment Interface, which we call UPI, has grown by 590 times during the period 2016 to 20. And currently, the payment transaction happening over UPI is something around 5 trillion rupees as far as March 2021 data. And this is growing at a rapid pace. So to address your question that what are the policy measures of Government of India that is actually prompting these sectors to grow? I'm keeping the BPO services for the time being set aside because this sector was growing. The sectors that are growing is actually the e-commerce segment. the e-commerce segment is growing and there is intense price competition among the suppliers. They are packaging the products in a way in the form of discounts and all these things, which is actually acting as incentives and attracting new consumers every day to the e-commerce platform. The fintech companies, the fintech startups, what they do, they actually also offer the various kind of value-added services, which makes the payments very easy. So, what Government of India has done to leverage on the digital economy, we have Digital India program, we have Startup India, and at the same time the Common Services Center at the grassroots level in the remote and rural areas. So the Common Services Centers are actually the access points for various types of public utility services, welfare schemes. So that is empowering people and making them the largest users of internet-based technology. And they gradually try to explore the options available on internet about various purchase and the transactions. And the apps like UPI, Veem, and all these are used by not only urban literate people, but also average educated rural people. So that are actually the silent drivers of the services transformation that is happening. If you come down to this trade in services in particular, Government of India has liberalized FDI policy to a very great extent in the last few years. If you see that almost all the sectors are under the automatic route, and services in FDI in services constitute 4/5 of the total FDI investment in India. So most of the sectors are either allowing 100% FDI and or more than 51%. So in that case, the liberal foreign direct investment environment or the liberal foreign investment norms that are attracting investment to the country. So the service suppliers are actually in a mood to diversify, and the working capital support they get from non-banking financial companies, the banks, the fintech solutions that are merging with the commercial banking services, providing universal banking services. So all this together is actually leading and diversifying the services sector to grow in a very massive way, particularly the financial services and the business services. I'll just take one more minute. Now, what to do then if these are the forces which are actually now talking about the digital technologies. Digital technologies, say distributed ledger technologies, or say big data. So Rasmi Vega and others, I think, in fact, all the panelists have mentioned that data is the future source of growth. So if that is something which is driving the entire economy, data becomes a ready-made input for packaging various kind of services. And that is actually the access to data. So for example, Aadhaar system in India, you are all familiar with the Aadhaar, say 1.2 billion people are now having a national identity, digital identity. So that becomes a ready data for suppliers, for government, but also for others to integrate their services provision to e-commerce platforms. So what then we should be doing to leverage the potential in the services sector? For example, Bangladesh. Bangladesh is making a structural change from the dependence on textiles, and you have mentioned in your paper. So if you want to make it a service-oriented economy, you need to have a system. I think Professor Raymond was mentioning that industrial policy. That is a very sensible thinking, that how do you plan in a medium term and long term that the national economic policy of your country allows the skill set to be generated. What was the India's comparative advantage? English speaking, competent engineers, software engineers. The demand for them was growing. So that was the beginning of India's services revolution. So if you want to do that, the kind of training, technical education, the skills, for example, other sectors like nursing, telemedicine, medical transcription. You need people, those who are internationally demanded in terms of their English skills, in terms of their basic software adequacy, software literacy, all these things you need to think about. So education system also has to be there. There has to be some policy in terms of the ecosystem. This was mentioned also, that ecosystem should be like something like India has experimented in the past, software technology park of India. And when we were in the student days, we see that each state capital has something like that. Now it has got expanded into many other areas. Digital India program is consolidating all these things. So Bangladesh can actually do that. The South Asian countries so need to have a skill set which permits them to stay competitive in the labor market. And as you know that that there happens a lot of migration from your country not in the high-tech sectors. So what you are actually doing, you need to bring back those labor force and engage them in the business services sectors, providing BPO services to rest of the world. So that could be a possibility of doing. So something like a digital India, so say like digital Bangladesh, digital Sri Lanka, something an umbrella program which takes into account the drivers of the economy, that is digital economy, financial technology, all sorts of things, and link it to the government delivery platforms, because government delivery platforms actually educate people that they get familiar with the internet-based solutions they're getting. So this is something that we can think about. So I don't think that the time permits me to go. So, but anyway, so to summarize, trade in services has to like Rashmi Manga mentioned, the TISMUS database, mode-wise database is available from WTO. In fact, they have started giving bilateral data also that can be analyzed. We have done some work which will be released in public mode soon. So that the mode-wise analysis is also required, where our competitive strength matches. So with this, I end and look forward to any further clarification on my points. Thank you, Dr. Pratham.
Thank you very much, Dr. Priyadarshi Das. Very interesting, actually, interesting and interesting journey of India and the suggestions you have made. And Bangladesh and other countries, and also South Asian countries, have a lot to learn from the experience in this area. Our designated panelists have spoken, all of them, but we don't have much time, but I will still allow some time for open floor discussion, and then if there's any question, we can also deal with that. And also from the floor, there are experts also in the audience. So I would like to request, and if you have any comments and observations, please share your comments. I can see, Wasil has raised hand. So do you have any question?
Thank you, ma'am. I want to share some observations relating to the earlier discussion about the digital access and digital skills issues. And I will refer to one of my earlier studies, which has been done to the rural households in Bangladesh that involves 6,500 households in Bangladesh, and it was a BIGD study.
So we don't have much time, so
I will take just 5 minutes to reflect on that. One is like
2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes.
Yeah, 2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes. So on skill mismatch, I would like to see some intensivizing program there between the industry and academia collaboration. And it should be a like more active and involved job placement or internship program as part of the academia curriculum that could generate a feedback loop between employer, student, and also the academia, so that they can reflect what are the curriculum changes needed at the tertiary level. Of course, for the overall national perspective, the national education policy should need to be revised and reflect on that thing. That's one thing. And another one is the digital access and digital skill issues. So for digital access, like, so we can think of like three pillars. One is like phone, computer, and internet. What we have seen in Bangladesh, particularly in rural areas or for the marginalized population, the access to computer and internet is much lower compared to the phone. The determinants of digital access we have found are the regional heterogeneity and also significant income disparity. We haven't found any gender disparity there. For the digital skill, here I come, like, so in our country, there is a lack of a national digital competency framework based on which we can actually assess the digital competency level of the general population. So in this respect, the use digital competency framework, we can follow that, which has like 5 pillars. One is the information and communication, collaboration and digital content creation, safety, and problem solving. So when we did the research on the rural Bangladesh, for example, the safety, digital content creation are
if you can, Basil, if you can have any specific recommendation, just 1 or 2 specific recommendations which are relevant. That
Yes,
would be useful.
Appa, yes, Appa, just give me 1 moment. I'm just before the recommendation, the context is to be placed. So, well, the digital skill, that is one of the pillar which is we are lacking, is the problem solving skills. For example, we have seen that in rural Bangladesh, only 0.6% population earn from online, and 3.5% population have online shopping experience. So from these statistics, we can clearly understand that there is a big scope of boosting the demand of online shopping and online earning in the rural Bangladesh, provided we can somehow aware the general people about the benefits of the digital skills and earning through that. So that's my point. Thank you, Appa.
Thank you very much. In fact, your studies insights are very useful, but we are running out of time, and it's already quite long session we had. But I would like to, of course, request Professor Mustafizur Rahman, Distinguished Fellow CPD, to also share his insights on this.
No, thank you, Famida. I think it has been quite a long session, and for me personally, it was in fact a learning session. And I think all our 9 panelists, they have really thrown very important insights, I think, which will be useful for you and your colleagues, I'm sure. Just 2 issues by way of emphasizing the importance for Bangladesh, which is that what I could understand is that it is very difficult to differentiate between competitiveness in goods and competitiveness in services. I think both of these are becoming very entwined. And what I can get from the presentations of the panelists as well is that if we don't have a competitive services economy, we will not be able to have a competitive manufacturing economy, and vice versa. So this is one message that I'm taking. And the second is that it is just not export opportunities. It is also ability to compete in the domestic market with foreign goods. They are also, I think, competitive services economy is becoming very, very important. So it's just not whether we can export, but also whether we can compete in our domestic economy. This is the second. The third is, I think, as Reshmi has mentioned, and others as well, some of the others, is that we should be engaged in the global discourse which is taking place, because there are very important issues with regard to data localization and a number of other issues of our interest, which if there is a plurilateral agreement, then there will be a problem for us. So I think that we should remain engaged in that discourse. I had just one suggestion, which was that the issue of broadband prices and internet prices was mentioned, and Almas Kabir also mentioned about rural-urban divide. So whether we can have a differentiated price for rural-urban, is it possible to have that type of policy? So this will be one. And the last point is, I think it was also mentioned by Selim and others, which is that our industrial policies and our export policies, our import policies, they don't really reflect these important issues which are becoming so vital as we go forward. Our policies do not reflect the digital services, e-commerce possibilities, the regulations that we need, and we should have a comprehensive trade and industrial policy. It's just not trade policy, just not industrial policy. So those would be some takeaways from this very insightful discussion that we have had today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mustafid Bhai. In fact, really, you very nicely summarized and highlighted the 5 key points which have emanated from this discussion today. But there have been a lot of important points. We have taken extensive notes, and we are going to prepare actually a note of the proceedings of today's discussion. And this is not the time to summarize this discussion. That's beyond my ability also. I mean, so much has been discussed by 9 panelists and also from the participants, and the paper itself was there. So, but all the points are there, and we will share with you the proceedings as I've mentioned in future. But I would once again thank all of you for your excellent participation and discussion and points that you have raised. This is the issue which has to be dealt by policymakers, not only in Bangladesh, but also all the South Asian countries and also countries across the world, because we are living in the digital age, and then gradually and increasingly we have to adopt to the new scenario, and that's why we have to be prepared for that, both domestically, nationally, and also internationally. So with these words, I would like to thank all the panelists, the participants, the friends from the media, and of course the colleagues from FES. Thank you very much. Have a nice day, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. See you, stay safe. And also Eid Mubarak.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Famida.
Thank
Eid
you.
Mubarak to everyone.
Thank you, Pushpa. Thank you.